Will that deal happen today? We'll watch. Brandon Arnold is the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union, and Mitch Rochelle is the CEO of M2 Communities. Brandon, I'll start with you. How important is it that these two sides walk away from these meetings here with a deal made, as opposed to they keep kicking the can down the road here, it seems, but do you think that maybe the deal is going to come today?
I hope so. And listen, we're not going to be looking at a comprehensive deal. We're not talking about a real trade agreement, but we are talking about a truce, which is critically important. This economy is, driving this economy with these enormous Chinese tariffs. It's like driving around with the parking brake on. Yeah, we can still move the automobile, but we're not going to do so at the speed and efficiency that we need. So I'm hopeful that we can reach some sort of a deal, drive down those tariffs, and make China play by the rules of the road for once in its life.
Yeah, the U.S. is interested in the rare earth minerals that China's got to offer. So that's sort of what's being discussed today. Kevin Hassett, though, the director of National Economic Council, appeared on Face the Nation on CBS over the weekend, and he shared his expectations about what might happen today in London. Let's watch together.
I'm very comfortable that this deal is about to be closed. And it's going to be closed not with a bunch of staffers and bureaucratic language, but with handshakes. So that's the way President Trump operates. We want the rare earths, the magnets that are crucial for cell phones and everything else to flow just as they did before the beginning of April. And we don't want any technical details slowing that down. And that's clear to them.
So, Mitch, do you share that optimism?
I think so. We're the biggest customer for China for the rare earth minerals, which they control 70% of the rare earth minerals on the planet. So I think it's in China's best interest to work out a deal so that the customer keeps buying and those rare earth minerals keep flowing. So there's certainly incentives on both sides for a deal to be done. And I would agree with Kevin Hassett that the devil ends up being in the details, and it could take months, if not a year, to document the understanding. But if there's a handshake and the tariffs can go away, and the uncertainty that's weighing down markets and consumers alike could disappear, I think there's a great path forward.
Yeah, to Emma's point, too, about these rare earth minerals, a New York Times article here reported that the United States supply of these rare earth magnets is quickly dwindling, and China actually produces around 90% of the world's rare earth magnet supply. So, Brandon, I mean, do they have some leverage here, maybe the upper hand?
They do have some leverage, but we can counteract that leverage, I think, with multinationalism. That is to say, we can harness the power, not just of the United States, but exert some leadership and have other countries, our regional partners, our other trading allies across the globe, to put more pressure on China than we can do with unilateral action. I think that's a path that we ought to be relying on more than we currently are. And if we do so, that really gives us the upper hand in China with regard to these negotiations.
Sure. I'm sure we've all noticed some of the media coverage of the Trump tariff debacle, right? What's going to happen? Who's actually securing the deal? Of course, watching Newsmax, we always said, let's wait and see. Let's see what comes from this deal. Let's give the president some chance to actually switch things up. Reuters is now appearing to take note of maybe some positives that could come out of this, saying this: aluminum producers in the U.S. win from Trump's tariffs. But then in the article goes on to say, however, some sector players are worried that Trump's move from June 4th to hike the tariffs to 50% from 25% could push prices so high that demand starts to weaken. So, Mitch, before jumping to conclusions here, how do we look at this coverage here from an objective lens?
I've always looked at this as the tariffs were being used as a negotiating tool. And if you didn't see it that way, I think you're foolish for that, because our counterparties, these other countries, knew that it was a negotiating tool. All you had to do was look back to the Trump 45 administration when he used tariffs or the threat of them against Mexico to get Mexico to secure their northern border, our southern border. Tariffs are one of the few things that the president has control over, so he's using them as a tool. China understands that. So I think the media coverage was just literally, it was as if it was a problem that they were looking for because they had to fill up the headlines.
Yeah. And then they came up with the taco nickname, right? So they were saying, why aren't you enforcing more tariffs? Which is what they had an issue with to begin with. We got to leave it there. Mitch Rochelle, Brandon Arnold, thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Thank you.